Hi guys, it's time to do another reaction video. This time it's going to be TrekCulture, which is like a subdivision of What Culture. Let's talk about Star Trek. Sean Ferrick is the guy doing all the talking in this video. I did go ahead and watch it already. This is 10 times Star Trek depicted addiction. I get it. A few videos have been a little heavy on addiction. We're going to move past that soon, but I really wanted to react to this one. Once I saw it show up, I was like, oh, I can't pass that one up. So here we go.
This is a matter of life and death.
According to the Cleveland Clinic, addiction is a chronic condition involving the persistent and intense urge to use substances or engage in behavior despite negative or harmful consequences. It can affect a person's mental and physical health, career, and relationships. Addiction is an all too common social ill in the 21st century that
They left out an important part. It's compulsive behavior, compulsive substance use.
affects people of all ages, races, and socioeconomic statuses. Although the future depicted in Star Trek is a utopia compared to our own time, it's not a utopia for the people living there. The franchise has depicted some present-day social issues, such as addiction, persisting into the space-age future. One of the unforeseen consequences of living in a technologically advanced spacefaring culture is exposure to brand new and novel forms of addiction, including exotic chemicals, new forms of technology, and alien experiences. Besides drugs, Star Trek characters have been addicted to time in the holodeck, minerals, devices, other dimensions, their own emotions, and even alien beings. However, even if the mechanism is different, the results, such as damage to one's health and relationships, are unfortunately the same. I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here are 10 times Star Trek depicted addiction.
Now, one thing I really appreciate that he's doing here is he's being very objective with his definition of addiction and making sure to include process addictions. That's the holodeck and some of the other things. The ones we're looking for are here. T'Pol is in here. Barclay is in here. There's some interesting ones, though. Well, they're all interesting.
Number 10. Symbiosis. The Star Trek The Next Generation episode Symbiosis first aired in April 1988 at the height of the American Just Say No anti-drug campaign. While studying unusual solar activity, the Enterprise rescues the crew of a doomed freighter. During the rescue, they seem more concerned with the cargo than their lives. After the rescue,
Right, so this is a season 1 episode. I'm going to let him finish, but I just want to point out, this guy on screen right here, that's Merritt Butrick. He also played Kirk's son. Fortunately, he died. I think this was his last on-screen role before he died of AIDS. The other guy that we just saw, they were fighting with each other. He played Khan's second in command or whatever in The Wrath of Khan. So it's fun. This is a season 1 Next Generation episode, but it's fun seeing some of the original series movie actors appearing. We always love that.
The freighter's crew explains that their cargo is a medication called Felicium. Long ago, the Brekkians began supplying their neighbors, the Ornarans, with this costly drug to treat a plague. The Enterprise crew discovers that by the 24th century, the Felicium, an addictive narcotic, had cured the plague, but because of withdrawal symptoms, the Ornarans believed they were still sick. The Brekkians, whose economy depended on the Felicium trade, hid the truth and continued supplying the drug. What could have been a powerful episode about the exploitative relationship between drug dealers and addicts is let down by the writer's waste of Tasha Yar. Tasha was a recovering drug addict who grew up on a failed Earth colony where crime, poverty, and drug abuse ran rampant.
I just want to point out, I can tell how wasted Tasha Yar was as a character. And when I watched this the first time, when it first aired, I didn't see her as a very good character. And I'm starting to understand now why, because until I watched this, I didn't even know Tasha Yar was a recovering drug addict. I had no idea. Yeah, they completely wasted her, literally and figuratively.
Should have been the first to warn Picard about the Ornarans being addicts. The moral debate between Dr. Crusher and Picard would also have been more powerful if Tasha had been involved. Instead, the writers relegated Tasha and her experiences to warning Wesley about the dangers of drug abuse in a heavy-handed scene that feels more like a PSA than part of the drama. Number 9. Damage.
Yeah, I remember that scene with Wesley. It was terrible. I mean, it was a good, reasonable discussion of what addiction is and why you wouldn't want to do it and stuff. Age appropriate for how old Wesley was. And fine for all of us kids watching it. But yeah, it's still terrible.
Originally airing in 2004 in the midst of the American opioid crisis, the Star Trek Enterprise episode Damage depicts T'Pol's struggles with Trillium D addiction. Just as opioids are used in pain management, Trellium-D is used as insulation against the spatial anomalies in the Delphic expanse.
Okay, that comparison is kind of silly. Opioids being used to treat pain is not compared, you can't compare that to insulating your ship to protect it from these space anomalies. These two things are not the same. And this is important because we have something you might call now medically induced addiction, where someone, maybe like me in my 20s, where I was vulnerable to addiction, but I wasn't an addict yet. But if I had gotten surgery and had to take a bunch of opioids like Vicodin or whatever for months afterwards to manage the pain, I could easily become an addict. That doesn't happen with Trellium-D in the story. That's why the comparison is just a crap comparison.
As useful as opioids are at easing pain, they are also highly addictive. Overuse can lead to opioid use disorder, OUD. Similarly, Trellium-D is a deadly neurotoxin in Vulcans that gradually breaks down their neural pathway. An initial loss of emotional inhibitions eventually gives way to hallucinations, violent rages, and potentially irreversible neurological damage.
That makes the drug you can best compare Trellium-D to meth,
leading to death. After being exposed to Trellium-D when the Enterprise passed through an asteroid field, T'Pol began craving the release from emotional control caused by the mineral and started injecting small amounts directly into her bloodstream. According to the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, one symptom of OUD is the continued use of opioids despite risks to health, relationships, and safety. Likewise, when T'Pol is cut off from her supply of Trellium-D during an emergency, she risks her life to retrieve some from a storage bay only accessible from the outside.
Okay, this is an important part of the depiction, and I'm not going to lie, at one point it was like my 5th or 6th rewatch of Enterprise, and I was deep in active addiction when I was watching it. I was crying while watching that scene. No, it was after I got out of my first rehab. I was crying while watching her going in, but there's actually a conversation that she had with, I want to say it was Dr. Phlox, it might have been with Trip, before the sequence where she goes into the cargo bay, where she's checking with the damage report, and you can see her getting more and more anxious about that one cargo bay being cut off like it was. That's something to focus on. I'll see if I can find it. If I can find it.
Emergency power's back online. We'll have face scanners in about an hour.
I'd like you to begin repairs on Eden.
I'll have to pull people from other areas.
There are engineering components in Cargo Bay too. They're crucial to Commander Tucker's repairs.
Aye.
Although Dr. Phlox helps T'Pol overcome her addiction, her ability to fully control her emotions is permanently damaged in much the same way that recovering opioid addicts face both short and long-term health effects. These include GI problems, respiratory issues, and cardiovascular conditions, among other risks. Number 8.
He's focusing on the comparison to opioids, which is good, all things considered, but I think we need to understand that it's not just opioids, it's all drugs. If I were on Enterprise in that situation and I was in active addiction, drinking all the time, and I heard that the cargo bay with all of my beer in it got cut off like that, I would have been on a spacesuit going in there too.
Raffi's struggle. Star Trek Picard's Rafaela Raffi Musiker had the long-running addiction arc that Tasha Yar deserved. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, more than 1 in 10 veterans who seek treatment through the US Veterans Administration meet the criteria for a substance abuse disorder. Military personnel with multiple deployments, combat experience, and combat injuries are the most vulnerable to substance problems. Raffi's problems began when Starfleet rejected her alternative plan for evacuating the Romulans from the Hobus supernova after the destruction of Starfleet's rescue armada during the Mars attack. Picard resigned in protest, and she feared dismissal. Denied the resources to investigate her theory that Romulans were behind the Mars attack, Raffi descended into paranoia and addiction. She disobeyed orders and committed court-martial-worthy acts including hacking, stalking, and coming to work intoxicated. When mandatory rehab failed, Raffi received a dishonorable discharge and moved to a small house at Vasquez Rocks. She became addicted to the paranoia-inducing snakeweed and alcohol. She later reluctantly joined Picard in investigating the android Daj Asha, traveling to the 21st century and fighting the Borg. When not actively aiding Picard, Raffi struggled to reconcile with her estranged family. Those seeking reconciliation should consider their motives, ensure their safety, and make sure they are prepared for rejection. Raffi rushed into contacting her son Gabriel and failed. Gabriel was still resentful toward her. Although Raffi would eventually develop a relationship with Seven, be reinstated in Starfleet, and reconcile with her family, her story was starker than Star Trek's previous depictions of addiction. Number 7.
They tried to cover the Raffi story. And I think they did it justice, but there's a lot more to it. Her addiction story is there for all 3 seasons that she's in the show. And it's worth watching just to see that. But I did want to talk about when she went to make amends with her son and it failed. I have friends that I have seen try to do it too. And it was too early, or they had their motivations wrong. When you're trying to make amends with somebody, your motivation has to be to try to make things well with them. If you're just trying to get it off your chest, I need to get this apology off my chest to someone who's not ready, but you're also not ready because that's the only reason you're doing it. That's why he goes off talking into motivation here. It's more. If you want to know more, go to an AA meeting or an NA meeting and ask them about step 9.
Hippocratic Oath. Star Trek Deep Space Nine's writers decided that, unlike the Klingons, the Jem'Hadar would only care about killing and winning.
Alright, this one doesn't count. The Jem'Hadar don't get high off of their drug. They die if they don't take it. It would be like if hemoglobin was, like if we were engineered so that our bodies would not produce hemoglobin, and the people who engineered us were the only people who could supply it. You don't get high with it, you die without it. So the Jem'Hadar don't count. I disapprove of this being included in this video. They left another addiction story out somewhere that they could have told so that they could talk about this one.
Also decided that the founders would keep them loyal by making them addicts, genetically engineering them to lack an enzyme provided by the narcotic Ketracel White. According to a study by the American National Institutes on Health, substance use disorders can indeed be influenced by genetic factors. However, as the National Institute of Drug Abuse Director Nora Volko, MD, cautions, genetics play a key role in determining health throughout our lives, but they are not destiny. In Hippocratic Oath, a Jem'Hadar commander, Goranagar, believes he has been cured of his addiction to Ketracel White by something on the planet Bopok 3. He hopes it will do the same for his men. When his men aren't cured, Goranagar demands that a captive Julian Bashir study the problem. Bashir agrees over Chief O'Brien's objections. Bashir discovers that Goranagar wasn't cured. His body naturally creates the enzyme produced by Ketracel White. Bashir decides to cure the Jem'Hadar's addiction. He reasons that they didn't choose it.
That's a story that Deep Space Nine left on the table too. When they found one Jem'Hadar who didn't need the white, they should have pursued that and didn't.
It was forced on them. An incensed O'Brien destroys Bashir's equipment, forcing Goranagar to let them go. Regretfully, the only thing Goranagar can do now is to kill his men. Number 6. The Game.
Alright, I know I've been trying to react to what he's saying. I did already watch this video. And so I want to tell you this before you watch this sequence. If you remember that episode, this is the one where they put on the silly little things and they got the little blobbies, whatever, in front of them, and then they get this little high feeling. You watch them go, oh. Right? If you don't remember, he was about to explain it. What they did, and I don't think they intended to do that when they made that episode originally, but what they did was show a very weird way they managed to show how addiction actually works, because the substances, drinking, alcohol, meth, heroin, they all trigger a release of dopamine, and that's what gives you the euphoria when you're using them. Without the dopamine trigger, you don't get the euphoric effect. You don't become addicted to the substance. This is the difference between, say, cocaine and caffeine. They're both stimulants, and you do become chemically dependent on caffeine. We oftentimes call that addiction too, but it's not. But you don't get high on caffeine, which is why you don't have to go to rehab for caffeine, but you do for cocaine. And in this episode, The Game, they kind of accidentally show how addiction actually works. So let's watch Sean Ferrick talk about it.
As depicted in the Star Trek The Next Generation episode The Game, sometimes electronic devices can be as addictive as drugs. Writer Fred Bronson was inspired by his experience playing Tetris. The episode depicts Wesley Crusher discovering the Enterprise crew has become addicted to the titular game as part of an alien plot to infiltrate Starfleet. The game consists of a simple headset worn in front of the eyes. The headset projects a grid pattern on which a player directs discs into cones. Completing a level stimulates the player's pleasure center and creates a psychotropic addiction that renders the player completely submissive. If a player refuses to play, the game plays itself, addicting them as if they'd been playing all along. Crusher and Ensign Robin Leffler discover the game's mind control mechanism and, with Data's help, free the crew from the game's influence.
Remember Operation Mindcrime? Video I did, 5 or 6 videos ago? That story is kind of buried in here too.
Real life, the American Psychiatric Association has identified the compulsion loop or habitual chain of activities as a feature of certain video games. In the compulsion loop, anticipation, buy improved gear, leads to a challenge, kill monsters, which leads to a reward, gold and loot, which leads back to anticipation. This produces dopamine that reinforces the desire to play through the compulsion loop. potentially leading to addictive behavior. Of course, in real life, when a player stops playing, the game doesn't play itself, at least not yet. Number 5.
I know it's a fairly new video, but clearly he hasn't seen Candy Crush. All right, this one's Barkley, and they're going to talk about process addictions. Just so you know, process addictions are going to be things like gambling, sex, fighting, stuff like that.
5. Hollow Pursuits. The episode Hollow Pursuits introduces Reg Barkley. Conceived by Gene Roddenberry as a relatable everyman, Barkley is the opposite of the Next Generation's main cast. Although he's a capable engineer, his nervousness, shyness, and neuroses keep him from integrating with the crew. Barkley's engineering colleagues don't make it easy for him. Geordie LaForge finds him frustrating, the other engineers make fun of him, use Wesley Crusher's derogatory nickname for him, and Wesley talks over him at meetings. Barkley takes refuge in the holodeck where he can play the hyper-competent, charismatic hero who does and says things he can't in real life. He also casts Troy as either an adoring love interest or goddess of empathy, and Dr. Crusher as a supportive mother figure. The holodeck is really an advanced form of virtual reality. According to Professor Rui Qin of the Communication University of China, VR's immersive quality makes it 44% more addictive than PC content. In his opinion, it is possible that VR users could prefer the virtual world to the real one. Barkley does eventually admit to Geordie that he's more comfortable in the holodeck. Unfortunately, his overuse of the holodeck has affected him like an addiction, especially at work. He shows up late, frequently ends up on report for not working to the best of his ability, and ends up with an unsatisfactory rating on his work evaluation. Professor Chin believes that a combination of technology that allows users to control the duration of their VR experiences and user awareness of the objective existence of VR would help combat VR addiction. Encouragement from Geordie and Troy and success in solving a tech problem plaguing the ship helps Barkley break his addiction and delete his fantasies.
Yeah, so what I wanted to do is just wanted to compare the carpet. I could just, chill on the carpet.
Number 4.
All right, why didn't he talk about social media, doom scrolling, TikTok videos? I have my YouTube app configured so that it only shows me one short at a time, but I've watched people who don't set it up that way, and it'll just keep playing one after the other. I'm a little disappointed that Sean Farrick here didn't go into that, but it is worth talking about it for a minute, because when you look at Facebook and you see the lives that people are living, and we know this, but you don't think about it when you're looking, they're carefully curating all the best stuff from their lives to put onto Facebook. They're not putting the other stuff. So you're seeing the perfect version of someone's life, the really nice, most dressed up version of their life. That's what you see on social media. It's not real life. It's like a holodeck.
Human error. According to Andrei Bormanis, the Star Trek Voyager episode Human Error was written as a metaphor for post-traumatic stress disorder. According to the Banyan Treatment Center, 27.9% of women with PTSD have problems with drugs. Instead of drugs, Seven copes with her PTSD.
I have PTSD.
From her time as a Borg drone in the holodeck. Rather than Reginald Barkley's hero fantasies, Seven imagines herself as implant-free and participating in situations most people would take for granted, such as romantic relationships, social gatherings, and decorating her quarters. The more time she spends in the holodeck, the more like an addict she behaves, ignoring her basic health and cybernetic maintenance, and missing real social gatherings such as B'Elanna Torres' baby shower. During an argument with her imaginary lover, a holographic Chakotay, Seven passes out when her cortical node shuts down, a failsafe designed to prevent drones from experiencing excessive emotion. This incident mirrors a drug overdose. Like a drug addict quitting cold turkey, Seven declines the doctor's offer to reconfigure her circuitry so that she can experience normal emotions. She tells him that her fantasies were an inefficient use of her time. When she declines the real Chakotay's invitation to a cooking class, he chastises her for not socializing with the crew. She contemplates this as the episode ends.
And that shows something. She had the opportunity to get recovery, and she walked away from it. She didn't go back to using, but she did go back. She's a dry drunk. That's what a dry drunk is. She's going to still have her dysfunctional emotions and stuff from the Borg implants, and she's not going to fix the problem. So she didn't go into recovery.
Number 3. Alice. In the Star Trek Voyager.
All right, this one doesn't count. This is the one with Tom Paris in the spaceship. That's not addiction. That's mind control. It's a mind control story.
Episode Alice, Tom Paris obsesses over an alien shuttlecraft, demonstrating what psychologists refer to as behavioral or process addiction. According to Caron Treatment Centers, a process addiction is a compulsive behavior that a person engages in and continues pursuing regardless of negative consequences. Instead of ingesting a substance, the person chases the dopamine high induced by the behavior. Acquired from a space junkyard, Alice features a neurogenic interface that interacts directly with the pilot's brain. This makes it faster and more maneuverable than even the Delta Flyer. As Paris begins fixing Alice, its artificial intelligence projects itself directly into his mind as a beautiful woman. Even when he doesn't see her, he's haunted by her voice, driving him to increasingly negative behavior. He ditches his uniform for a flight suit, argues with Alice, cancels plans with Harry Kim, ignores his personal hygiene, forgets his duties, demands supplies that can't be spared, steals equipment, and neglects his relationship with B'Elanna Torres. When Paris attempts to cut ties with Alice, the neurogenic
Okay, I'll give you all the symptoms of addiction are there, but it's still a mind control story.
interface shocks his brain. Addicts can feel discomfort when they can't pursue their behavior. Addicts can pursue their behavior despite negative consequences. Under Alice's influence, Paris takes the shuttle on a test flight toward a dangerous anomaly. Paris is connected directly to the ship's systems through a tangle of wires resembling nerve fibers, a perfect visual metaphor for addiction's changes to the brain. Mirroring the way addicts lose their identities to their addictions, Alice informs Paris that they've merged into one. Paris is saved from an untimely demise by the intervention of his family, Voyager's crew. Torres appears alongside Alice, distracting Paris from the flight long enough for Tuvok to beam him home. Number 2.
Voyager did something that none of the other shows at that time really did. So the Next Generation did it by putting a therapist on the bridge. Voyager really addresses mental health topics. At some point, I'm going to do a video on the Voyager episode. I think it's called Extreme Risk. It's the depression PTSD one about B'Elanna Torres. What made Voyager special at that time was that it directly confronted these issues. They even put a name to the depression in that episode with B'Elanna Torres. You do see it more in the new Trek. Discovery, in particular, really plays up, supporting each other, and you can't do it by yourself and stuff like that, and I love that. And of course, the second season of Picard, we'll go into that at some point. I don't really want to get distracted talking about it right now. But you really start to see this in Voyager, and as much as Voyager is the weakest of the original Star Trek shows, it has that going for it, at least, and I appreciate it.
The Muse. In ancient Greek mythology, the Muses were goddesses of inspiration. In the Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode, The Muse, Jake Sisko is seduced by a different kind of
All right, think about Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan. You can even think about Kurt Cobain if you want to for this.
muse, an alien woman named Onaya. Onaya promises to unlock his creativity just as she helped other famous writers, including the English poet John Keats, the Roman poet Catullus, and the alien poet Tarbald. Onaya's abilities do draw out Jake's creativity, however, she drains some of his life energy as she helps him. After several hours, Onaya insists that Jake rest and sends him home, his overstimulated brain on the verge of synaptic collapse. Jake and Onaya's relationship is similar to both steroid abuse by athletes looking for a shortcut to victory and the persistent belief that drugs such as LSD and marijuana increase creativity. According to the New York Department of Health, while steroids can increase lean muscle mass, they can cause serious health problems including high blood pressure, high cholesterol, liver damage, mood swings, and violent behavior. As Heidi Morward, MD, explains, studies have shown that LSD and marijuana actually impair creativity. Later, confronted by Ben Sisko, Onaya admits that her process for helping artists unlock their potential kills them. She gives them immortality through their art. After Jake recovers from his ordeal, he shows his father what he wrote, although he feels it's not really his work. Impressed, Sisko tells Jake that the words were there, Onaya just helped to bring them out. Likewise, Dr. Morward explains that the artists are creative despite their psychoactive drug use, not because of it. Number 1. Star Trek Generations.
I don't know if we really want to watch this. This is Soren, and I think his name is Soren, and the Nexus. Kirk winds up not looking real good in this one. So let's go.
Star Trek Generations is a drama about grief masquerading as a space adventure. According to Psychology Today, while grief is primarily associated with death, it can occur anytime we lose something we hold dear. Unresolved grief is a major contributor to substance abuse. Instead of substances, the Elorian scientist Tolian Soren, grieving the loss of his family and culture to the Borg, seeks a return to the Nexus, a dimension of joy and wish fulfillment outside spacetime. Soren and the other Elorian refugees, including Guinan, first encountered the Nexus when they were caught in an energy ribbon during their escape from the Borg. Although rescued by the Enterprise B, aided by Kirk, Scotty, and Chekhov, the Elorians never forget their experience. Since Soren's plan to re-enter the Nexus involves blowing up stars to draw the energy ribbon closer, Picard, himself mourning the loss of his brother and nephew, is determined to stop him. During their confrontation, Picard enters the Nexus. The Nexus shows Picard the family he could have had if he weren't in Starfleet. As Psychology Today explains, substance use only makes grief worse by extending the feelings the user wants to numb. Similarly, Picard realizes that the joy the Nexus offers is an illusion and recommits to his mission. Picard finds Kirk in the Nexus, trapped there since aiding the Elorians. Like Picard, Kirk is tempted by the chance to make up for past regrets, but realizes he'd miss excitement and danger. He leaves behind his illusions to join Picard in defeating Soren. Thank you very much for watching along, folks.
They did a good job of trying to make that generation story look good. It does not look good. But thinking about how grief can amplify, or how substance use can amplify grief and keep you in this cycle where you're stuck in it, this is how a lot of people in a divorce wind up addicts. Luckily, I didn't have a divorce cause that, although I did have a divorce. Right. Anyway, I also feel like it was an opportunity to really work with the Guinan character, because when you see people now, like in real life, who will sit there and listen to you and go on and on and on and they'll talk and they sound, they'll say wise things or ask questions that really make you think. 9 times out of 10, if you ask them, they're in recovery. They're in what you would call late recovery. They've been sober for 5+ years, at least a lot of them 10 years or more. That's what I've seen in people who've been in recovery for a long time. And considering that Soren is also Elorian, he's, same as Guinan, you really feel like they saved the best part of the Guinan character for a movie that she barely appeared in. There was so much they could have done with that character, and I'm surprised Sean Ferrick didn't call that one out either. But, oh well. So I guess that's it. We're going to watch the rest of the boilerplate stuff. 10 times Star Trek covered addiction. I'm sure I really have a lot more to say on the subject. I am starting to feel kind of burnt on the subject. So I guess we'll move on and we'll watch something else next time.